This task involves writing a procedure that is capable of opening a text file in read mode and subsequently identifying the words within the text file which are the longest of those words. So we're going to first of all have to create a text file containing a bank of words separated by commas as specified in the task, so that we will be able to test our program. So if we open a web browser and we go to lipsum.com, this gives us a made-up language referred to as lorem ipsum, and if we scroll down we can type in a number such as say 300, set it to words, and that will give us paragraphs with 300 words. It doesn't matter if you start with anything in particular. So here are our paragraphs. Let's take a copy of them, just a simple Control-C, and then into a text file we can do Control and V for paste. Next we have to convert all of the spaces within our text file into, let's say, type in a space and then replace it with a comma instead, and that will then separate the words out using commas. Secondly, we're going to go through and remove any full stops. So let's take the full stop, and I suppose we could just replace it just with nothing, and then that could potentially leave then, yes, double commas from earlier on. So anywhere where there already was a comma in the sentence that was followed by a space, we could end up with a pattern of 2 commas, and we'll just manually replace that with a single comma, say and replace all. And finally then, as part of sort of cleansing this data set, let's put in a comma here and let's delete out the new line character. And we'll just do that manually because we don't have so many paragraphs. They're very, very small in number, and that should bring us to the end of the file. Okay, so we now have a text file that contains a bank of words. Running our eye quickly through them, there are some words that stand out as slightly longer, although we're going to let the program itself identify what these are. So let's close the text file for now, and we can close the web browser now that we're finished with it. Okay, so we're going to be defining a procedure here, and this procedure can be written as def, and then we're going to say extract longest words. Now, there is nothing specified in the original task to say whether we should be, for example, passing the identity of the text file as a parameter. In this case, in order to provide just a working solution, let's not do that. Let's have this procedure always going to the same text file, and as a future extension to the program then we could get it to work for any text file where we pass in the name and path of that text file. So what we can do here is we can begin by linking to the file. So we're going to say that we're going to open the file in read mode first of all. So let's call our file, we'll just call it file equals, and we'll say open, and then inside these round brackets we'll provide the path to the file. Since this Python file, which is called GCSE 009.py, is stored in exactly the same directory as the text file, which happens to have the same file name but with a different file extension, we should just be able to write GCSE 009.txt, and that should be able to identify the file. We will say that we are opening the file in read mode, and that the encoding used is the UTF-8 encoding, just for the avoidance of any doubt. Now, given that we're opening a file, we should also make sure that we have closed the file. So for fear of forgetting, let's do file.close down at the end before we complete the intermediate steps as well. Alright, so as an intermediate step, what we're going to have to do is extract all of these words out of the file. Python offers options such as the read method, the read line method for reading a single line, and then read lines for reading multiple lines separated by the new line character. So in this particular problem, we're going to use read line because all of our text is stored as one continuous line of text. So what we're going to do is read one line of text, which will read the entire file. And what we can do here is we can just call it txt and say equals file.readline, and that will then read the entire thing. Okay, after these 3 lines of code, what has been achieved is the entire contents of the text file have now been read into a variable called txt. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to split the contents of the txt string into a list of strings. So what we're going to do here is txt.split, and then inside string pattern here, we're going to say we're going to split using the comma character. This means that we will convert, for example, if I do a small sort of mini example, if the original string said a, b, c, d, then that would end up being converted into a list which had a as a string, followed by b as a string, followed by c as a string, followed by d as a string. So in this case, the conversion then is from a string format into a list format. So let's call this word list and store it as a variable. Next, we have converted the entire text file into a list of words, and our next job is to set about identifying which words are the longest and trying to identify the longest words in the list. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pass through the entire list and try to figure out exactly which words provide us with the longest word. So what we're going to do is identify the length of the longest word. So in order to do that, we're going to say longest equals 0, and then we're going to start iterating through the list. In order to iterate through the list, we have for loops available to us for count controlled loops. There are 2 different for loops available in Python. This task is less interested in looking at the index values of each word in this case, and more interested in the words themselves. So in this case, we're going to use the for loop that says for every word in the word list. And what we're going to do is we're going to say if the length of the word that we are currently on is greater than the value of longest, then what we'll do is we will say that longest becomes equal to the length of the word. Now, that means that we're going to iterate through every single word in the word list, all of them, and if we ever come across a word that is longer than a number that we have found before, then that means that we're going to update the value of longest to that length. By the end of this for loop, we will have inside the variable called longest, we will have the length of the longest word, but we won't know how many words in the list have that length, but we will know the number that we're dealing with. Okay, so having now identified the length of the longest word, we now revisit all words in the list and output any that are that length. So we begin again with our for loop, and we say for every word in the word list, and this time if the length of that word is exactly equal to the value of longest, then we are going to print that word. And that means that only those that meet this rule, this criterion, are going to be displayed. So the original task asked us to output any word or words which were the longest within the text file. And that means that the procedure has now carried out the task that it was expected to do. So in this case, each of the words will be output separated by a new line character, and I think that that is a reasonable stab at a solution to the problem. In order to try to identify bugs, there's only really one way to do that, and that's to get testing. So we're going to go into the main body of the program here, and we're going to now write some lines of code to carry out the testing. Since this is a single procedure that carries out all of the work, what we can do is Control and C for copy, go down here and do Control and B for paste, and that should be enough just to get the procedure going, opening the text file, extracting in all of the words, converting them into a list of words, and then iterating through them to work out which ones are the longest. So let's go ahead and run it, see what happens. There we go. in order to give ourselves a little bit of comfort that maybe things are going well, what we could do is revisit the text file and just make sure that the words that we have in there, there we go, do contain one super long word. And then if we were to rerun the program now, directly from our Python environment here, it should only identify that one word in this case. Okay, generally speaking, I'm happy that the program is working. I'm happy that the procedure is doing what it's set out to do.